Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Rama. Isn't it nice? We're early. Not only on time, but early. Kartals. Some kartal player. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Gopi Jana Malabha Girivara Dhari Gopi Jana Malabha Girivara Dhari Yasodanandana Brajachanarandana Yasodanandana Brajachanarandana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamana Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivara Dhari Girivara Dhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivara Dhari Jasodanandana Brajachanarandana Jasodanandana Brajachanarandana Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jayo Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivijagacharya Astakara Sattasi Sriman His Divine Grace Sri Bhakti Vedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Gora Premanandi. Nice, really. You got to see your mother since she got back? From a distance, because she's self-quarantining. She's well, yes? Probably you heard if it was otherwise. You hear bad news, you don't hear good news. Okay, well, continuing with the Mahabharata questions. There were a few of them that didn't have answers, and compliments of Amol Bakshi in Houston. Thank you, Amol. There's now some answers to some of those questions. And Shri-Rupa, I'm sure you remember the Ghatotkacha question, like how is he sacrificing his life for Arjuna? And your mom came up with something. Did you? Okay. What she came up with was she heard a YouTube talk on Mahabharata that said Ghatotkacha was disposed towards adharma, averse to the Vedas, and protection of cows. That's what this speaker said. So I was curious, the speaker said it, is that really what the Mahabharata says? Because I've heard speakers say things that aren't. So here it is. This is from Adi Parva, describing the birth of Ghatotkacha. Thereafter, Hidimbi took a beautiful human form and sported with Bhima in various heavenly forests, mountains, and riverbanks until she finally begot a son. The child was exceedingly fearful to look at, with pointed ears and sharp teeth, and he grew up within the very hour which he was born. Indeed, this was the same day on which he was conceived, for this is the way of the Rakshasas. This wonderful child possessed prowess that excelled all other Rakshasas. And because he was bald, his parents gave him the name Ghatotkacha, or the pot-headed one. Ghatotkacha. The Thereafter, in spite of his ghastly appearance, the Ghatotkacha became a favorite of the Pandavas, and indeed, he was almost considered to be their sixth brother. Soon after delivering the child, Hidimbi departed, and then Ghatotkacha also took his leave after promising Bhima that he would come to him whenever he thought of him. Actually, so this is underlined and highlighted, Ghatotkacha was a special creation of Indra for the purpose of becoming a perfect match for Karna. Indra knew that Karna would possess his invincible dart. It was a little research. Dart can mean a missile. And so he made this arrangement to protect his beloved son, Arjuna. That's from Adi Parva. Then here's from Drona Parva. Immediately after Karna killed Ghatotkacha with the Shakti weapon, there's a discussion. It goes as follows. On the other side, the Pandava warriors became very aggrieved and their eyes filled up with tears. That's Ghatotkacha's demise. The only exception was Lord Krishna. And although it seemed highly out of place, after the slaying of Bhima's son, he laughed loudly with great joy. Indeed, after warmly embracing Arjuna, Lord Krishna began to dance in ecstasy. Then, after once again embracing his dear friend, Krishna stood up on the chariot and repeatedly uttered exclamations of jubilation. This incongruous sight only served to aggravate the grief of the Pandava warriors, and Arjuna, who was extremely morose, then said, "O Krishna, such an exhibition of happiness on this sad occasion does not seem at all befitting to me. Still, there must be some very grave and inscrutable reason for your jubilation, and so I request that you kindly disclose it to me." Lord Krishna replied, "My dear Arjuna, listen to me, for I shall immediately dispel your grief. The reason I am so happy now is because Karna has wasted his infallible dart. Don't you see? Now you are free to fight with him without anxiety. Karna was the single greatest stumbling block in our path to victory. Indeed, if he were still in possession of his original celestial armor and earrings, then no one would have been able to vanquish him. Neither all the demigods, no, nor yourself with your Gandiva bow. Even now that Karna is bereft of his natural armor and earrings, and his prowess is only mild in comparison with that which he originally possessed, he still is the only one capable of killing you, and no one else, my dear Arjuna. There will soon arise a golden opportunity for killing Karna when his chariot wheel sinks into some mud. Do not worry, for I will inform you when the time comes. Oh, Arjuna, I want you to know that it is only for your sake that I formerly killed many great demons who had posed themselves as Kshatriyas, and even I had to accomplish such feats with the help of various contrivances." Arjuna inquired, "My dear Lord, what do you mean by saying that you had to kill all those demoniac kings with the help of some contrivances?" Krishna replied, "O son of Kunti, if Jarasandha, Shishupal, and Ekalavya, the Nishada prince who had not been slain by me, had they but not been slain by me, then they would have become unbearably powerful, and they would have all aligned themselves with Duryodhana to fight against you in this great war. Therefore I empowered Bhima to kill Jarasandha, and then disclosed to him the secret of the Magadha king's birth, so that he could bifurcate him. From within his heart, I inspired Drona to arrange for the Nishada prince's thumb to be cut off, and then later I killed him in battle. Thereafter I caused the death of Shishupal by encouraging him to commit more and more offenses against me. Similarly, here comes the Gatotkacha. I arranged for Gatotkacha's death just so that Karna's infallible dart would be utilized. My dear Arjuna, if Karna had not employed that dart to slay Gatotkacha, then I would have killed Bhima's son myself. For it is my eternal vow to destroy anyone who disrupts the path of virtue. Indeed, it is only because I know that Gatotkacha has destroyed sacrifices on numerous occasions. Thus, he truly deserved to be killed. And then there was a discussion about Ashvatthama's Ashvatthama's killing the sleeping sons of Draupadi and why Krishna didn't protect. There was some discussion on that topic. So, Amol Bakshi supplied in the Sauptika Parva. It is very clear that Lord Shiva was responsible for killing, and Ashvatthama was only the instrument. The reason, this is Amol, seems to be simply that their destined lifespan was over. He comments, we find a similar dynamic regarding the fate of Arjuna's chariot, which Krishna had protected during the war, yet once the war was over and the protection withdrawn, the chariot turned to ashes in an instant. So here's the Mahabharata. Ashvatthama is particularly disturbed and angered at the way Duryodhana was defeated by Bhima. At this point, Duryodhana is not yet dead, although he is lying gravely injured and about to die. Ashvatthama, Kripa, and Kritavarmana are in a forest by the Pandava camp, and Ashvatthama has made up his mind to kill all the Pandavas and their sons that very night while they sleep. When he arrives at the Pandava camp, however, he sees a gigantic creature guarding it, and he is unable to defeat the creature. Ashvatthama decided to take shelter of Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva appeared before him. Ashvatthama then slowly approached the blazing sacrificial fire with upraised arms, but just then Lord Shiva personally appeared there in order to restrain him. Lord Shiva then smilingly said, "My dear Ashvatthama, because I have been worshipped by Lord Krishna with complete purity and sincerity and devotion, there was no one more dear to me than should be he." That says him. Indeed, it was due to my affection for Lord Krishna that I protected the Panchalas during the great battle by using my mystic powers in various ways. However, the destined lifespan of the Panchalas, that's the 5 sons, has now run out. Therefore, in order to fulfill your ardent desire, I shall enable you to act instrumentally for their destruction. So, it was time for their lives to expire. It doesn't say what that was all about. After saying this, Lord Shiva gave Ashvatthama a wonderful sword, and then he simultaneously disappeared from view and entered into the son of Drona's body, Ashvatthama's body, Shiva. Being empowered by Lord Shiva, Ashvatthama blazed up with fierce energy, and when he returned to the gate of the Pandava camp, he saw Kripi and Kritavarmana were waiting to assist him. Therefore, by the mercy of Lord Shiva, he was able to stealthily enter the Pandava camp. And there's some similar research about Abhimanyu and why was Abhimanyu not protected? Why was Abhimanyu killed? Why didn't Krishna protect him? The Adiparva has a section that lists the previous births of many key personalities in Mahabharata. He gives a long list. It's in response to the demigod's prayers. Vishnu transmitted a message to the heart of Brahma, assuring him that he would soon incarnate upon the earth in order to relieve her burden. The Lord further ordered his servants, the demigods, to also appear on earth to assist him in his mission. Thus, in order to counter the many Daityas who had taken birth as Kshatriyas, the demigods also began to assume human forms. And there's a long list of who assumed which forms. And when the demigods had been discussing amongst themselves about the parts they would play in serving the mission of the Lord, Soma pleaded, "No, I cannot bear to part with my son. He is dearer to me than life itself, and so I beg that be exempted from incarnating upon earth." They discussed with Soma, you can't say no. Finally, the Soma, or the moon god, relented, saying, "All right, I will allow you to take my son, but not for long." His son's name was Varchas. Let Varchas appear as the son of Arjuna, the incarnation of Nara, and let him become a great chariot warrior in his youth. Then, upon reaching the age of 16, he must return to me, after performing heroic feat that shall earn him eternal fame. During the great war that will relieve the earth of its burden, let Varchas annihilate 1/4 of the opposing army in just a half a day, before laying down his life upon the battlefield. In addition, let him beget a heroic son who will continue the Bharata line when it is almost extinct. The demigods heartily approved of Soma's words, and so they happily agreed to accept his proposals. He goes on, this is now Amol Bakshi. This is further corroborated by reference in Drona Parva. This is when Yudhisthira is grieving Abhimanyu's death, and Narada Muni and Vyasadeva are consoling him. Srila Vyasadeva then said, "My dear Yudhisthira, in the same way you should cast off your grief over the death of Abhimanyu, like Akampana's son. He is now enjoying life in heaven, along with Soma, from whom he had originally come." So, Akampanas from Ramayana. There's more, but I won't read that. So we're back to Canto 10, Chapter 14, Text 21, 10, 14, 21. And the translation reads, Brahma's prayer. O Supreme Great One, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, O Super Soul Master of all mystic power, your pastimes are taking place continuously in these worlds, but who can estimate where, how, and when you are employing your spiritual energy and perform these innumerable pastimes? No one can understand the mystery of how your spiritual energy acts. if you remember. So the emphasis in this section of his prayers is going to his spiritual energy or his shaktis, material spiritual. It's a Sambandha Gyan description of Krishna's energies specific to his pastimes and his activities with Brahma. So here's what Vishwanath writes. You were born as Krishna to relieve the burden of the universe, and you appeared as Rama to kill Ravana. As the white, red, black, and Shama avatars, you institute religion. The purpose is not to defeat the false jnanis. Actually, no one can fully understand where you will appear, the purpose, the time, and the number of appearances that you will make. O unlimited Lord, cause of all causes, if your transcendental body were not beyond the modes of material nature, one could not understand the difference between matter and transcendence. Only by your presence can one understand transcendental nature, the transcendental nature of your Lordship, the controller of material nature. Your transcendental nature is very difficult to understand unless one is influenced by the presence of your transcendental form. O form spread throughout the universe, Bhuman. O Bhagavan, though you spread throughout matter, you are still full in your 6 opulences. Though you are full of all opulence, you also expand to witness everything as Paramatma. O Yogeshwara, because of your Yogamaya, you display such powers. Who can understand your pastimes performed through the 3 worlds? Why? Where? How? When? Your form is unlimited, spread throughout the universe, full of all opulences. It is not material, but everywhere in the 3 worlds. How is it possible to satisfy simultaneously all your devotees at all times with pastimes? This can happen because of Yogamaya. By your inconceivable energy, Yogamaya carries out the work of presenting various pastimes to various worshippers at suitable time. That was Vishwanath. Jiva Goswami writes, after describing everything, Brahma speaks with respect. O unlimited Lord Bhuman, O Supreme Person endowed with all powers, Bhagavan, O Soul within all beings, or the cause of all beings, Paratman, O Lord spreading yourself over all time by your innate power of yoga, Yogeshwara, who knows how or when your pastimes will occur? You alone know the location of all the unrestricted pastimes, since you are unrestricted, Bhuman. You alone know how these pastimes take place, since you are endowed with all powers, Bhagavan. You alone know the quantity of these pastimes, since you are Paramatma. You know when they will occur, since you spread all over all time, Yogeshwara. The cause of this is Yogamaya, your great Swarup Shakti. Sometimes Yogamaya is described or listed as a separate spiritual potency. Sometimes, like this, it's a subset of Swarup Shakti. Just different ways of analyzing and describing. And it's the last, Sanatana Goswami writes, among your avatars, is there not one that performs actions like a normal person of this world? That was a question. Response: who knows you? You are unlimited, Bhuman. You're endowed with all powers, Bhagavan. You reside within all beings, Paramatma. You can do the impossible, Yogeshwara. In the sequence of names of the Lord, they are gradually more difficult to comprehend and show the greater excellence of the Lord. Paragraph. You spread your Yogamaya. This is a special Shakti of the Lord, which is endowed with eternity, knowledge, and bliss. Thus his pastimes are real. This is explained in Bhagavatamrita. That's Sanatana Goswami's book. Or, Yogamaya can mean mercy. Maya can mean mercy. Endowed with power, yoga, shown to devotees. Your activities can be understood because, your activities cannot be understood because they are unlimited and filled with your powers. Or means it's an alternative rendering of the verse. Or, who are so many materialists seen even today? Why are so many materialists seen even today? Who can know your activities? They are generally bewildered, since your pastimes are difficult to understand, being spread with Yogamaya. That is suitable because you are Bhuman, Bhagavan, Paratman, and Yogeshwara. Since the Lord is inconceivable, his pastimes are inconceivable. That is the conclusion. The ignorant must surrender to your devotees for gaining knowledge of your pastimes. By this they are delivered, and by nothing else. These explanations are connecting with messages that were heard earlier. They're not explicitly in this verse. Sanmukaritam Bhavadiya Vartan, that particular phrase, is descriptions of your pastimes directly given by you or given by your devotees. Sanmukaritam. That's the means of realization. That's stated earlier. What's stated earlier is you can't understand Krishna by mental speculation. One can understand Krishna through bhakti, and that bhakti is characterized by namanta eva, and by dedication to his messages, the messages heard about Krishna from Krishna or his devotees. That's it's Bhagavad Dharma. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. That's Bhagavad Dharma. And Bhagavad Dharma is made possible through the agency of Krishna's devotee, and as it's being said, not otherwise. By this they are delivered, and by nothing else. So unfortunate people can be made fortunate. I mean, it's the basis of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan movement, in one sense, is just being expressed by Brahma, only the language is different. But the message is, the unfortunate can be made fortunate by hearing and chanting and remembering the glories of the personality of Godhead. And all of those messages of the personality of Godhead, they're endowed with great potencies because they're manifested by the Lord who has great potencies. His Sarup Shakti manifests his form, his Sarup Shakti manifests his pastimes, his Sarup Shakti manifests the loving exchanges with his devotees. And those topics have those Sarup Shaktis. They have Nija Sarva Shaktis, all of Krishna's potencies within the name or form or qualities. having a discussion today with a devotee who, by profession, has knowledge of different technologies, including technologies of how you can create holograms. He was describing. So he was saying it's not so difficult to make a hologram of Krishna speaking Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. Now that would be a pretty wow experience. His point was, it appears to him that younger generation people, their attraction is less to the deity worship and standard ways of expressing and experiencing devotion, different than historically is the case. And so some creative approach, particularly because he's knowledgeable in technology, through technology to be able to reach or attract younger generation people to Krishna. So we had a little discussion. Creativity is great. Distraction isn't great, because distraction can be the result of attraction to technology, and so that the subject is lost because of distraction. And the basic principle is hearing. So Prabhupada, here's a little bit. 1974, I think it was my first visit to Brindavan. And it was the first of what Prabhupada was calling the Mayapur Brindavan Festival. What he wanted was the devotees in the West come to Mayapur and Brindavan once a year for rejuvenation, because, the devotees were intensely engaged in preaching, and to get spiritually rejuvenated or revitalized like that. So that was the plan. So when we went to Brindavan, this is making this philosophy lighter, by the way. But it's still philosophy. One of the places we went was a temple that's not a Gaudiya temple. It's some other temple. The big, opulent temple. I forget the name of the temple. I haven't been there since. But on display in that, the reason Guru Das took us there, was on display in that gigantic, opulent temple was a three-dimensional exhibit that Bhaktisiddhanta had designed long ago. And it was a landscape of Vrindavan. Over here is Nandagram, and over there is Govardhan Hill, and over there is Radhakund, Shamakund, like that, Jamuna River. This landscape, and some trees and cows. And so underneath there was a series of chains that somebody over here was winding a crank, and there wasn't any sound, it just, other than the sound of the chains rubbing beneath the exhibit. But so the Krishna and the cows and the cowherd boys went from Nandagram to Govardhan Hill. You can hear all the chains rattling underneath, and then they have to wind it back. They went backwards back to Nandagram. That was meant to give a visual depiction of Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. Following that same principle, Prabhupada had some of his artists go to Mayapur and learn how to make what was called dolls, using straw and plaster of Paris or clay or whatever it was. And then you make a model, because they would every year make murtis of Durga. and Kali, and for Durga Puja, it's like that's kind of profession. People knew how to do it. And you can drive by and see people on their front of their shop is all kinds of images of different things. So some artists were sent to learn the process. And the purpose of learning the process was to create the first American theistic exhibition called Fate. First American theistic exhibition, Fate. So then there was a team of people that were once trained. They were making dolls or dioramas of different, they designed what would be, so they made 2 sets. I don't think they made more than 2 sets. And that's where the changing bodies diorama came from, that principle. But the one that was made for the Fate at museums, one was Detroit, because I think Ambarish sponsored it. And the other was in Los Angeles, and it's still being operated. The one in Detroit kind of went off the map. As far as I know, they don't use it. In LA, they stopped using it because no one could keep up with the technology, but somebody figured out the technology, and they've been using it. It's a big hit. It's on one of the things to do when you go to Los Angeles. It's on the list. Top 20 things to do is go to the Fate exhibition. And it's nice technology. We'll get back to this Bhagavatam verse. It shows Krishna's pastimes, and it's computerized. And one of the exhibits I like a lot is you're standing in front of a mylar mirror. You can see one way, but otherwise you can't. And then the light, it's in a little corridor, and the light goes out. It's like you're in India, and the circuit blows, power goes. So it becomes completely dark, and the people are just standing there. It's totally dark. There's no sunlight, nothing, no electricity, nothing. And this British voice comes on, deep resonating voice, and says something like, "Who are you? Really?" And some music, and then a light goes on behind you, and everyone can see their reflection in the mylar mirror. Really, take a good look at yourself. Who are you? Are you that body? And the music goes on. And then you hear the sound of a heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. And then a spotlight behind the mylar mirror, you can see the first of the dioramas. It's the baby that's in the womb, in an embryo, curled up and all that. And the light comes on, this is the soul. There's a spark of life within all forms of life, and that spark of life moves from this baby body, and then the light dims, and then it's the next body. It's a little baby lying upside down, and you hear a baby's voice crying, wah, wah, wah. And and then the soul moves on. So that light goes out and goes to the next. And then you hear a boy bouncing a ball, and other boys in the background playing. The voice of little boys playing. And then that light dims, and it's a boy studying his books. Then it's a man holding a bag of money. So it goes, and then it gets to the end, and this old man is coughing, and he expires. He goes on to the next body. So it's using technology, the voice and lights and this and that, and in sequence and so on. It's teaching the message. So there's a devotee that knows about technology, is thinking how to use technology to reach audiences that, if it's not techno-savvy, that kind of doesn't hold their attention so much. So I didn't do it yet, but I said I would write a letter to the TOVP folks, because that's what they're thinking. how to deliver the message to millions of people that are coming from all over the world, captive audience, and take them into this place, that place, the other place, and teach them Krishna consciousness quickly. And at the end, they get a book, of course, or many books or whatever. So, holding attention of audiences through sound vibration may have its challenge, but you can't get away from that. So get people to that, you may have to do this and the other thing and something creative to get people to that position. But it's the sound vibration that elevates and transforms. It cleanses, lifts, and brings a conscious revolution, consciousness revolution through sound. And that's what Brahma is doing. He is explaining through sound how things that cannot be understood unless received through sound vibration method, they'll remain forever a mystery. And as mentioned in the morning class, that seems to be a strain running through all these verses. The process of Gyan will leave one in a dead end. You won't be able to understand. And you will be able to understand that which is otherwise unknowable through sound, at least, to some degree, because we're tiny and the unlimited is unlimited. But we can even get a picture of what's unlimited and not just throw our hands up in the air and say, yikes, I can't understand this. It's unlimited. It gives us something of a picture of the unlimitedness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus an inspiration to surrender and so forth. Very similar to the first verse of the Chaturshloki Bhagavad Gita verses. Aham sarvasya prabhavo matak sarvam pravartate, that one. Iti matva, thus knowing, iti matva bhajante mam. It's a catalyst for, let me serve him. Serve whom? Serve the Supreme Great, the Yogeshwara, Bhagavan, and so forth. Paratma. Or there's a short version of Paramatma. A topic that came up this morning, I was thinking further about religion. Theistic religion teaches there's God and God is almighty. And because God is almighty, it may invoke a reverential mood. Or, since he's almighty, it can be the other way. If you don't serve him, you're going to get spanked. You're going to go to hell if you don't, so you better. And people are, motivation by fear, or motivation by guilt, or motivation by, a lighter but still material is the material kind of duty, because I'm duty bound to those who have supplying necessities of life. Nityo nityanam chaitanas chaitananam eko bahunam yo vidadati kaman. Prabhupada quotes that so often. Yo vidadat. One is supplying the necessities of everyone, and we're grateful to one who is supplying necessities. And thus, let me show my gratitude. And that's the beginning. Service to the great is natural. And as these prayers move along, we're going to hear more than the greatness of the all great Supreme Person. We're going to hear of the sweetness of Krishna and Brahma's attraction for the sweetness of Krishna. After showing all these things that he understands about the Supreme Great, he's most attracted by the greatness, by the sweetness feature that he doesn't have sufficient comprehension of, although he recognizes it. He recognizes it within the devotees, like Nanda and the other devotees, the cowherd boys. How fortunate are the cowherd boys? He's recognizing how fortunate are the gopis. And for that matter, any of the inhabitants of Brindavan, because they're receiving darshan of Krishna, they're receiving the touch of Krishna's hand, like the trees and creepers as Krishna passes, the ground, the water. You know, the whole of Vrindavan is being decorated by dust from Krishna's feet, and so forth. And they become transformed into ecstasy. I think I mentioned this, but there's a verse from Bilvamangala Thakur's writings. It's very, very nice. Within the Puranic literature, there's description of many incarnations. It's speaking of the special position of Krishna. Within the Puranas, there's descriptions of many incarnations, as this verse is speaking about, and they're all glorious. But as far as I'm concerned, where is that incarnation that transforms even non-moving and inanimate objects into the position of ecstasy? Just by touching them with his feet, or glancing upon them, or hearing the sound of his flute, they become transformed into ecstasy. And it's not described elsewhere. Lord Ramachandra was in the forest. Maybe some of those things happen, but we don't read about it. But it's often spoken about in relation to Krishna by different narrators, gopis being amongst them. Okay, so let's see if there's some discussion on this. Either the Mahabharata part or the Brahma's prayers part or something unrelated altogether is fine too.
Kumash, I've been thinking about this. Lord Brahma was corrected by Krishna. In that correction, there is loving, caring, and mercy followed within it. Something I've been noticing it, when correction comes from spiritual master, someone who is guiding you, there is intention behind it. There's loving, caring, and giving mercy. But if you take a couple of steps downwards, that isn't the case. Sometimes just for the sake of correcting, or sometimes just a tendency of correcting, or sometimes just proving that you're wrong. Sometimes doing correction but not having a good intention. So how do we take those corrections?
How should we or how do we? Well, you already described, it hurts. It's saying it doesn't go in. So a lot depends upon the relationship with another person, and a lot depends on the qualification of that other person. But sometimes the qualification of the other person, one doesn't read properly for different reasons. Our own defensiveness or something. So how you take correction that doesn't come from someone that's an authority, one of the one of the rules of 17:15 Bhagavad Gita, austerity of speech is not to instruct others unless there is that relationship. Now, people don't follow Bhagavad Gita and they don't follow austerity of speech always. But sometimes things may be said or need to be said depending upon the circumstance. So how you respond depends upon the circumstance. I would say, in principle, don't depart from the position of humble service to Krishna. Nothing. When you're fixed in the mood of humble service to Krishna, you're not dislodged from that by anything, good, bad, or mixed. So strive to stay in that position. And then consider, in the mood of service, what's the best service response. And then you're not struggling with, all the emotions of who's this person? Take a hike, or I'm out of here, or oh yeah, I'll show you, or you've lost bearings. And so with shelter in the mood of humble service, shelter in Krishna, go there. Regardless of any other thing that you may do. Go there and stay there. Anything else in the room? If not, we'll go online. Anything online? Okay.
Shri Radhika Mataji has two questions. First one, from Krishna's laughing and rejoicing at the death of Gadotkaja, in the midst of the grief of the Pandavas, it strikes me that while Krishna is always kind, his empathy may not fit our stereotypical material paradigms of empathy.
Yes, right.
Perhaps I am not clear regarding what is spiritual empathy. Will you please comment?
Well, in relation to Krishna and Arjuna's, they're inseparable, eternal associates. So how Krishna understands how Arjuna is going to respond to something, and how Arjuna is going to respond to what Krishna does, it's not stereotypical anything. Her specific question is, what is spiritual empathy? Spiritual empathy is helping a soul come closer to Krishna. That's real spiritual empathy. And when it becomes directly Krishna to Arjuna, it's to strengthen his connection with Krishna. So, when you have a very, very special, unique, close relationship with another person, you may take liberties with that other person that otherwise you wouldn't take, or someone that doesn't understand the affection between you and that other person. They'll look at the exchange and go like, what's that? I'm thinking specifically, as I'm speaking, I'm thinking of a relationship between Trivikram Swami and Sridhar Swami, two god brothers. And there was a period of time when Trivikram Swami was visiting. Sridhar Swami was basing himself in New York, as was I. So we had breakfast and lunch together every day. And Trivikram Swami came to visit, and they had a long-standing relationship from somewhere. And, their exchange with each other was shocking. They would insult one another and insult back and insult one another and insult back and insult one another and insult back. And I was watching the exchange. And they weren't like sometimes people do when they're insulting. They either get really angry or they just laugh. They were doing neither. They just kept insulting and insulting. And I said, Maharajas, how can you speak like this with one another? And they said, you don't understand. It's just a loving exchange. I said, I definitely don't understand. But it was fun. Kind of like, a king will keep a wrestler, and the wrestler's got to really whack the king. Otherwise, you're not a good wrestler. But who can whack the king? You're decapitated if you whack the king. The king is powerful enough to do it by authority and by physical strength. So, but as a Brahmana likes austerity, a king likes a thrashing. They like. Kshatriyas like. So, what does that have to do with her question? Spiritual compassion depends so much on the relationship, and the essence of spiritual compassion is to strengthen the connection of one soul with Krishna. And what that looks like can be all kinds of things. Depends on the relationship and the intimacy and how the understanding of one another. So you and I aren't going to do what Krishna did with Arjuna. Probably we wouldn't do it with anybody. But Krishna is omniscient, and his point is Ghatotkacha was to be killed because of his fundamental principle, not just that he was a Rakshasa, but he behaved like a Rakshasa. And it's really odd. This goes way back to, he was a favorite of the Pandavas, although he was adharmic. But Krishna, anyway, not just because he's a relative, you spare the relative, but if he's adharmic, then you put your foot down. And these other examples, if they were left alone, not just that they would be adversity for Arjuna, but the whole world would be in turmoil. If Ekalavya hadn't had his thumb taken away, it's Kali Yuga before it's Kali Yuga time. Somebody who has power without character. Very dangerous. So Krishna personally killed him. I don't know that story, but Krishna personally killed him. Now, how did Krishna personally kill him? Because he's not supposed to be fighting in the Kurukshetra battle. So, Amol, if you're listening, you can look that one up. What was the circumstance of Krishna killing Ekalavya? The thumb was Krishna inspired, that we got. Drona did it by inspiration from Krishna. But there's a reason why he did it. So there's a reason behind, there's a compassionate reason behind everything. And we can say the protection of innocent people is one of the big ones. Okay.
Second question from Shri Radhika Mataji. Is it correct to understand that the purpose of Lord Brahma's praising the sweetness of Vraja pastimes at the end of these very lengthy and high philosophical prayers is to show the superiority of Madhurya over erudition?
Yes. That is, he who can build the universe, he who can understand all these subtle things about Krishna, is feeling, there's so much more than this, and that so much more is the Brijvasi's love for Krishna. He's at the top of the mountain saying, I'm not at the top. The topmost is the Brijvasis. Yes.
Next question is also from Shri Radhika Mataji. I am checking if my understanding is correct from the recently concluded retreat. Hindsight is 2020, no pun intended. Looking back, I can see how an ordeal I passed through has brought me to a place of being able to receive greater mercy in my current new situation. When we are going through an ordeal, we might not have the clarity to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So during that time, is it gratitude within our relationships that can help provide us a sense of shelter?
Yeah, and patience also. And a sense of connection. I mean, gratitude and connection are closely tied together. If you're in a position of shelter, you can pass through any storm. That's it. In the back.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I really appreciated the diorama that you were describing about
Changing bodies.
Yeah, the changing bodies. And I was also thinking that while we may know the philosophy very well, it's very important to present the philosophy in a way that's attractive and understandable and
Yes.
relatable to people.
Yes.
And I was also thinking that, sometimes it may take, of course, we can try to do it on our own, but it's helpful to receive guidance from somebody who has already done it.
Mm.
Then it saves a lot of our time
Yes.
in learning. So, do you have any suggestions, like where we could, approach somebody and take some guidance regarding presenting Krishna consciousness?
Well, it depends on what your thing is or what your disposition is. And this particular devotee, the starting point and the middle point and the ending point was his fascination and his knowledge and skill in technology. I mean, he knows how to make holograms. He knows the science of it, and he could do it. And it's very expensive, but so what I suggested in his case was technology-wise. Let's go to people that are using. I gave 3 different examples, and go to them and see. Rather than reinvent the wheel, that you copy success, and that happens in ISKCON all the time. Something is successful, and people copy it. They'll do it in their own way, but you have to find 2 things, a voice and a market. Who's the audience that you feel you can relate best with, and what are their sensibilities, and then you try to connect with it, and you experiment, and you modify, and you go forward with it. You may recalibrate. So get an idea of your own voice, where you can relate best with audiences, and then you look at models. Those 3 things. What's out there already? What are creative people? What efforts have they made? One of the just when you're pausing, one of the mediums these days because of the COVID situation, is little snippets of something that can be played again and again, reaching audiences you don't even know. You don't even know if they know you and whatever. But, short, because attention span is short messages that have some graphics and some things, some stirring message. Doesn't have to be shocking. Just something that's moves the mind or moves the heart, or both. But that's become part because of COVID and for other reasons. It's become a creative way to reach people. Just take, book distribution as an example. Once upon a time, when the airports were no longer accessible, some devotees thought, oh, that's the end of book distribution. Because there was so much dependence, particularly Los Angeles and some other places. But, book distribution hasn't waned. So how do you find different? And then, how some of our book distributors speak to people. I don't know if I could ever speak to people the way they speak to people. And in spontaneous ways, I recently sent one out. Somebody was in Russia. They went up the top floor. They were warned, but they forgot by the time they got there. There's mafia people. They went inside the door. Everybody in the room had guns. And the opening line of the person who wasn't initiated said, what are your thoughts about death? That was his opening line. They thought, the person that was with him said you could hear the triggers click. They were getting ready to, is this person, what's up? But because, anyway, so some persons just have a knack for innocence and spontaneity of, something. Anyway, but that part of that is knack and part of it just practice. So, and in creative ways to do book distribution, creative ways to communicate. Find something, each of us, ways that we can reach people. And same three things. What's your voice, what's the audience, and what are models that are already there? And create some new ones if something may fit, just fine. And once you start you're going down a path of reaching audiences, some creativity will come of its own accord anyways, by Super Soul's arrangement. And then even diversifying audiences. The main ingredient is the inspiration to reach audiences and to be an instrument of disciplic succession in doing that. Okay.
I had another question.
Sure.
Somewhat different from, but also related.
Okay.
My question was, while it is very practical that when we are learning something, like it's nice to approach a devotee and follow them and gain from their experience. No one is perfect. Like they have a skill, but at the same time there is also some human defect that
Okay.
that everybody has.
Yes.
Or most people have.
Yes.
So how do we still value the person and at the same time guard against their defects?
A big part has to do, same as Sri Radhika, my answer is a lot has to do with this Sri Radhika's. If you're grounded in your relationship with Krishna, if you're confident and secure in your relationship with Krishna, you can take the nectar and leave the rest. because so that the appreciation goes to the Krishna connection with this. If you're somebody you're taking guidance from, they're a Krishna devotee. That's confidential. It means they're a Krishna devotee, and they have defects. So, you knowing that ahead of time, you're going for the nectar, and you're protected by your connection with Krishna, and you're getting some inspiration. But you don't have to absorb everything. It's specific to the shortcoming defect side. Otherwise, it becomes yours. The blind following. So therefore, so that the connection, and ultimately our founder Acharya, the pristine example. And that's a place where you need to keep that connection strong. Reading his books and hearing his lectures and reading biographies about his life, and that's one of the things he just added from this GBC strategic planning team is there's the snippets, little 3-minute audio recordings of memories of Prabhupada. Anyway, little keep the connection strong, the spiritual connection strong, and then whether the source is infallible, and then you can mix with people that are inspirational but fallible, and you're protected because of that connection with the infallible. Not in a judging position or a guarded position, just you're protected. And your power of discretion or discrimination is on, but not judging. Okay?
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a Gatotkacha question, if that's
You have
okay.
a which kind?
A Gatotkacha question.
Katotkacha, okay.
I'm just trying to understand, is it possible to see his behavior as related to his body, his Rakshasa body, like his tendencies coming from that?
Yes.
Yeah. Because I was thinking he was related to the Pandavas, but he still, that doesn't overlook his behavior. So
That's
Krishna
right.
had to have him killed, but he was liberated, right? He went.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
I was thinking like Krishna is reciprocating on the level beyond the body to him, and I really
yes.
thought that was cool.
Yes. Now there are cases where someone may be like, let's take Ritrasura. Ritrasura was born of a Brahmin, but he had, by mantra arrangement, he was an enemy of Indra, and he looked fierce and terrible and all those other things. But he was an unalloyed devotee of the Lord. That was what's inside. In the case of Katotkacha, it's more puzzling. We've already covered it several times, but because he had affection for the Pandavas, one would expect that he would have become purified of those lower tendencies. But he wasn't. He was in at least what we just read. He was interrupting yajnas. He was doing Rakshasa business. Who knows what he was doing when he interrupted the yajnas? Was he eating the brahmanas, having a Brahmin feast, or whatever it was? But disturbing Vedic culture, disrespecting Vedic culture. They had to be dealt with. But he got ultimate mercy. I mean, like, if Putana and Bakasura and Agasura got liberation, then what to speak of Gatotkacha? Yeah. No? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. You know what? I think I'm going to skip the Mahaprasadam because it's the same people. I think I'm going to skip it.